Good morning, boys and girls. Today we are going to work on week 3, day 2 packet. It looks like this. Everything in today's lesson has to do with fractions. We're going to be doing a lot of comparing fractions, looking at numerators and denominators, what happens when the numerator gets bigger and what happens when the denominator gets bigger. And then we're going to order some fractions. So we're going to put them in order from greatest to least. So let's get started with our fluency. And this is one of the which does not belong. So let's take a look. Okay, so it says, read the following, select one expression that doesn't belong. Provide details about your answer choice. So you're going to look at each one of these options in the 4 squares and decide which one doesn't belong. Now, there's no real right or wrong answer to this problem as long as you can come up with a reason that works. So, for example, I could say this last one down here, it doesn't belong because they're adding 4 numbers and all the other ones are adding 3. Now, I challenge you to come up with another reason why a different one doesn't belong. You could add them all up and talk about the answers, or you could just look at the numbers that they're adding. As long as you can come up with a reason why one of them doesn't fit with another one, then you have a right answer. Okay, let's take a look at numerators and denominators. So let's first talk about a numerator. So a numerator in a fraction is the number of pieces shaded in the whole. So if you look here, I have a bunch of fractions with different numerators but the same denominator. So 1/5, 2/5, 3/5, 4/5. The size of the pieces stays the same because the numerator has nothing to do with the size of the pieces. Here, only one piece is shaded because it's 1/5. Here, 2/5, 2 pieces are shaded because it's 2/5. And then here we have 3 pieces and 4 pieces shaded. And the numerator tells us how many of the pieces are going to be shaded, but all the pieces are the same size because they're all fifths. Now, I want you to use this concept to help you with task A. Now, the question in task A is a little bit different, but this information will help you. Okay, let's talk about denominators now. So a denominator is the fractional unit. So it's the total number of pieces the whole is split into, and it also tells us about the size of the piece. So thirds, fourths, fifths, sixths, those are all fractional units. They talk about the size of a piece. So here, if you look at the top one, that's split into thirds. Each piece is a third. Down here, each piece is a fourth. Notice that when the denominator gets bigger, the size of the piece gets smaller because we have to break our whole into more pieces. So sixths are much smaller than thirds because I have to split this into 6 equal pieces. Up here, I only have to split it into 3 equal pieces, so the pieces are a lot bigger. So the denominator tells us a lot about the size of the piece, or how many pieces our whole is going to be split into. Okay. Now, finally, your last task, task B, you have to order fractions. So this is the tricky one. And notice that I put a number line here so that you guys can use benchmarks to help you compare these fractions. So the benchmarks are just familiar points on the number line that help us decide where the fractions are going to go. So I would say your first step should be to decide which fractions are more than a half and which fractions are less than a half. So starting with 3/8, I'm trying to decide if it's more than a half or less than a half. So I know that 4/8 is equivalent to 1/2 because 4 is half of 8. Okay, so if 4/8 equals 1/2, then 3/8 must be less than 1/2. And I know it's about 1/8 less than 1/2. So it's going to be right about here. Now, 1/3 is also going to be less than 1/2 because thirds are smaller than halves. Like we saw before, a larger denominator, if the numerators are the same, a larger denominator means that the pieces are smaller. So it's also going to be less than 1/2. Now 5/6, well, that's more than 1/2 because 3/6 equals 1/2. I also know that 5/6 is only 1/6 away from 6/6, so it's going to be really close to 1/2. And 2/5, well, 2/5 is equal to, I don't know, because fifths are an odd number. So I don't know if it's more or less than 1/2, but I can change it to tenths. So I know that 2/5 is equal to 4 tenths. Oops. That's supposed to be a 10, guys. Sorry. And that's only 1/10 away from 1/2. So my 2/5 is going to go right here. It's farther away from 1/2 than 3/8 because 3/8 is 1/8 away and 2/5 is 1/10 away. And that's how I order my fractions. So I want you guys to do this on your own, on your paper. I'm going to take them off the number line. And I want you guys to do this on your own, on your sheet of paper. You can always comment with any questions that you have, but I want you to draw the number line on your sheet of paper. All right, good luck, guys.